Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Assembly Judiciary. Welcome to everyone here in Carson City, as well as there in Las Vegas, and of course, anyone watching online through Nellis or through our legislative YouTube channel. And with that, Committee Secretary, will you please take the roll?
Assembly members Cole, Dahlia, Gonzalez, Gray, Hanson, Hardy, LaRue Hatch, Marzola, Moore, Nadeem, Orentlicker, Roth, Urick, Chair Miller.
Here, and please mark Assemblymember Gray present when he arrives. And Assemblywoman Hanson, her things are here, so I'm assuming she's arriving. So please mark her present as well. And with that, just a few reminders. Please make sure to turn down your electric devices, to turn down any of the volumes on that, so not to be disruptive. Just a reminder, we will have public comment today at the end of today's meeting. We have two bills that we will hear, asking that presenters keep their bill presentations to 15 minutes, and anyone making public comment or testifying on a bill to keep those remarks to 2 minutes. We ask for anyone speaking that you please state your name and spell it so that we have it correct for the record the first time that you speak. Also, you may see members looking at their devices. Again, please don't take this as a sign of inattention or disrespect. There's just a lot of research and communication that's going on up here, as well as if you see members coming and going, please appreciate that they're also presenting in presenting bills in other committees as well this morning. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. We have two bills on the agenda. The first one is Assembly Bill 473, which makes an appropriation for a forensic DNA testing program. Now, I know members, you're probably wondering, why do we have an appropriation bill in here? Obviously, this is not a money committee, and we do not make decisions, although we can make recommendations and pleas for money, but we have nothing to do with money. We focus on policy. So the reason why we're hearing this bill is because this is some newer cutting-edge technology that comes with DNA testing. So we are still able to amend the bill to work on the policy of it. Obviously, like anything else, money is for another committee and possibly another time. But I also figured this was also something, being that we are judiciary, that you may find wildly fascinating and interesting. I know I did when I met with actually the developers even before session started. So they are not here, but I believe the CCO is here to present about the technology and about the program. Also, you know, I'm not someone that believes that we legislate certain vendors, but again, this is so new coming into this space. And so again, it's just very worthwhile that we hear and learn about this technology. So your bill hearing is open. AB 473 is open, so you may come on up. And I'll give you a few minutes to get settled. Welcome to Nevada. Is this your first time in Nevada?
I've been to Nevada before.
Okay, great. So welcome to Carson City. I'll give you a few minutes, a few moments to get settled. Please state your name and spell it for the record. And then whenever you are ready, please proceed.
Yes, my name is Andrew Singer. Thank you. We're good now. My name is Andrew Singer. That's AndrewSinger. I am the Chief Commercial Officer for a company named Othram. I may proceed. So good morning, esteemed members of the Nevada Judiciary Committee. I want to thank you guys for the opportunity to come and speak to you today on this bill. As I mentioned, my name is Andrew Singer. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Othram. Othram is a company that was founded a little over 6 years ago in 2018 with the goal of developing and deploying technology that could help advance cases and bring answers to the criminal justice community. Our goal with this technology is to bring justice, fairness, equity, and certainty to unsolved cases. Our goal is not only to help resolve cases, but also to provide access to this technology to communities that are ultimately and often underserved by the criminal justice community. The goal of this technology, and really what's within this bill, is to ultimately work towards a situation where this technology, I'm going to refer to it as forensic genetic genealogy, or FGG, becomes universally accessible to all criminal casework within this community. Over the past 25 plus years, the forensic community, which is comprised of crime laboratories, law enforcement agencies, medical examiners' offices, coroners, prosecutors' offices, and defense, have leveraged DNA technology to resolve cases. They've relied on a tool called CODIS, which you may or may not be familiar with, but that's a national database that is comprised primarily of DNA profiles from convicted felons or suspects that have qualifying arrests. The technology itself, though, has limitations. When running DNA in this technology, you're looking at approximately 20 markers of DNA every time you're running these samples. It's extremely good technology to confirm identity or to eliminate suspects. However, when put into practice, and a DNA profile search against these databases, it becomes ineffective if there is not a direct match. In fact, with the 20 markers, you get an incredible likelihood if there's a match within there that the DNA belongs to somebody. If somebody's not in there, you know that it doesn't. But if there's somebody that is not in these databases, it becomes extremely difficult to leverage that DNA technology to determine identity. Unless there's that direct match or a first-degree relative, a parent-child type relationship, you're effectively at a DNA dead end, even though that you have good evidence to help resolve these cases. As a result, over the years, there have been hundreds of thousands of cases put into the database. Only a percentage of them actually result in a match. That means there are hundreds of thousands of cases with good DNA evidence that remain unsolved. Beyond that, there are tens of thousands of unidentified human remains cases, including hundreds within the state of Nevada that remain unsolved. These cases, again, they have good DNA evidence, but they're just limited by the way that the technology has been deployed. And many of these unidentified remains cases, just so to be clear, are homicide cases as well. And in order for the investigations to pursue on these homicides, law enforcement or the investigators themselves often need to determine who that victim is in order to help proceed with the investigations. That said, through advanced DNA technology applied with forensic genetic genealogy, I'm going to tell you about what that technology is. We can look at hundreds of thousands of DNA markers rather than the 20 markers in CODIS. We can search different databases, and we can apply an investigative practice to make identifications and resolve these cases. There are so many cases and families that can benefit from this technology. The single limiting factor to applying this technology is funding. In Nevada alone, Othram has provided answers to 15 cases throughout the state. These are just cases we can talk about. We can't talk about all of the casework that we've done. Many of these cases have taken upwards of 30 to 40 years to resolve. That means there are families waiting for answers, cases go unsolved, uncertainty in these investigations. But through partnerships with the criminal justice community, the agencies that I referred to, from Reno to Las Vegas, we have collaboratively worked to identify cases that can benefit from this technology. The interesting thing about all of the cases, or the majority of the cases that we have worked with in in Nevada, is that they have been privately funded, meaning philanthropists have provided funding for this, or we've used public crowdfunding to fund these, which is not something that's common in the criminal justice community. It's become a necessity because the current laboratories within the state, they don't yet have this technology online, and as a result, they cannot offer that service to law enforcement. So typically, funding from these sources, the philanthropy and the crowdsourcing, are not used or required in forensic investigations. And while it's been incredibly impactful, this funding is both limited and unsustainable. Because of this limits access to this technology to many agencies and many communities that can benefit from it. To provide you, we have provided a packet that outlines several of these cases. You can take a look through those. Every one of those pages on that book represents an individual and their family. But within each one of these, you'll also notice that we identify how they were funded, and you'll see all but one of them was privately funded or used public funds. But one example I want to highlight is the case of Stephanie Isaacson. Stephanie was an innocent 14-year-old girl. In 1989, she was on her way home from school. She took a shortcut that she normally took, but she never made it home. It wasn't until later in the day where the family went looking for her and the investigators went looking for her that they found that she had been violently attacked, sexually assaulted, and brutally murdered. In the early stages of the investigation, a suspect was identified and arrested. Ultimately, he was dismissed as a suspect, but not until his life was upended over the course of his arrest and the subsequent investigation. As I mentioned early on, DNA not only has the power to identify, but it also has the power to exonerate or eliminate. But fast forward to the 2000s, the local crime laboratory, in this case the Las Vegas Metro Police Department, processed evidence from her case. They found foreign male DNA with a sample that was directly tied to the sexual assault based on where the DNA was coming from. The resulting profile did not result in a matching CODIS and was almost completely consumed in the process. This case was presented to Othram in 2019, and when we looked at it and we reviewed it, there was 120 picograms of DNA, and I know that probably doesn't mean a lot to you, but what that represents is approximately 15 human cells. It's virtually nothing. Every time you touch something, you're leaving hundreds of cells behind. We were dealing with the last bit of evidence in this case. We actually told them in 2019 we did not want this case. One of the things that happens every time you process DNA is it's consumed. You can't get it back no matter what you do. And it was the responsible decision to not do it. And what you're learning, I told you this all started in 2018. This technology has rapidly advanced over the past 6.5 years. But it was 2021 when we worked with the agency, we told them that we were confident enough that we could work this DNA, and we were successfully able to generate a DNA profile with hundreds of thousands of markers, search it in the database, perform the investigation, and ultimately pointed the investigators towards a suspect who was ultimately confirmed as the perpetrator in this case. Now, this suspect had just died in the mid-90s. But that said, it was 30 plus years later that Stephanie's family finally got the answers that they'd long been looking for, and her case could be closed. And it's also important to note that this case would have never been resolved utilizing the current technology. CODIS in itself didn't start in earnest until the late 90s, early 2000s. This individual would have never been in there. Stephanie's case was privately funded, and that was from a philanthropist. But again, the answers for this case could not have been achievable without this type of testing. Since this case, Othram has partnered with Las Vegas Metro Police Department to help resolve 8 additional cold cases. You'll see some of those in this packet. We've worked with the Washoe Medical Examiner's Office in the identification of 4 unidentified remains cases, including Judy Manzanares, a 1990 homicide victim. She's the first one on the page that you see. And again, so many of these, now the true investigation on what happened to her can happen, but at the very least, Judy's family at least knows where she is. But outside of these examples, Othram also works with innocence groups. We do this throughout the country. Recently, Othram worked with a defense firm that exonerated a man that had wrongly been incarcerated for more than 60 years, his entire life. In every one of these cases, the DNA testing, the legacy DNA testing that I talked about, has reached an investigative dead end. Beyond that, these investigations have taken hundreds and hundreds of hours, creating exorbitant costs that included investigative work, laboratory testing, and work throughout the court system. In addition to be able to help resolve these cases, this technology can more cost-effectively and quickly resolve cases. Many of these investigations, through the hundreds of hours work, have had costs into the millions of dollars. FGG, Othram's technology, and FGG is quickly becoming an incredibly cost-effective tool to help resolve these cases, and we're starting to see agencies apply this early in the investigations. It's important to recognize that the public labs, including those within the state of Nevada, do not yet have this testing online. Othram is working with many labs throughout the country to begin onboarding this technology so that they can provide these services at no cost to the agencies in the future. And we look forward to the day where every case can be run against this powerful tool. However, the challenge is it will take several years to fully accomplish, which is why this bill is here today. This bill is recommended so that cases that are in desperate need of this technology now can have access to this technology. Just so you know, the average cost from a case from end to end, from evidence to answers, is $10,000 to $15,000. This is often a fraction of the cost of the heavy costs associated with these investigations. When properly applied, forensic genetic genealogy technology can save valuable time and resources for the partners that are involved in these cases. This is critical at a time when budgets are limited, staffing is limited, and caseloads are increasing. It can quickly eliminate suspects from the investigations, and it can resolve many cases that have gone cold or cases that currently represent a threat to public safety. Similar bills along these lines have been passed in other states, including Washington, Florida, and Missouri. Othram and other service providers that offer this technology have quickly demonstrated both the demand and the need for this testing, as well as, more importantly, the impact of this technology. The bill that's proposed today requires the use of forensic genetic genealogy to generate a minimum of 100,000 markers. This is the minimum needed to find distant family members in the searchable database. It's focused on trying to demonstrate resolution in these cases and would allow partner agencies to apply for funding to drive equity, fairness, and certainty, as well as justice in so many investigations, including the ones that have been shared in the packet today. I am hopeful that you guys will take this bill into serious consideration and can be passed, and I look forward to any questions from the committee. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for your presentation and for being here. And before we get to member questions, can you just briefly describe what the process looks like so that everyone can understand what this technology is actually doing that's different from other?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Madam Chair. Yes, this technology is very different. It's different, yet it's same. It's really interesting. It follows the same process where evidence exists at a crime scene and you try to isolate the DNA that's potentially probative to your case. However, as it goes down the process, we're applying a completely different technology. I had alluded to the CODIS technology with approximately 20 markers. That uses a technology called STR testing. So we share a workflow that's a similar workflow, and as it gets to the STR testing, it goes off and you generate a profile of 20 markers, you search it in CODIS, and then hopefully you get a match. We're taking that DNA extract and going a different way. We're applying what's called SNP testing, or single nucleotide polymorphism. But we're looking at unique individual markers that have changed over the time but get passed down through families. But because we're looking at such a heavy data set, as we generate these massive data sets, upwards of 500,000 markers of SNP testing, we're able to then look at in different databases. There are a few databases out there where individuals have consented to allow their DNA to be put in there, consented to allow law enforcement agencies, medical examiners, or criminal justice agencies, those partners that I talked about, to search against and find distant relatives. And because we're dealing with so much data, we're not able just to see the individual, the parent-child. We're able to see distant relatives, first cousins, second cousins, outward to fifth cousins. What happens from there is really interesting. We'll get a set of matches. We try to figure out how they're related to our unknown sample. And then a genealogist, often, or investigator, will start to reverse engineer these family trees and ultimately try to get you back to where that individual is from. So it's almost a combination of advanced DNA testing to generate a lot of data and an investigative genealogy process to point you back to that individual. Those leads are then provided to the investigators as investigative leads, and as they advance in their investigation, let's say in the case of Stephanie Isaacson, they would then go and collect a fresh reference sample for there, and then it's confirmed using your traditional testing. So I'm hoping that tracked, but it's essentially a similar process. We're generating a lot different data. We're searching against different databases and applying an investigative genealogy process on top of that.
Thank you for that. We will start with member questions. We will begin with Assembly Member Roth.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation. I'm hoping you, kind of just going off of that, if you could maybe help me understand a little bit better. I have, as an attorney, worked on cases with DNA, and so I'm wondering, just as to illustrate, so I've had a case where the DNA was able to point back to a potential family member, and it wasn't clear if it was a brother or the father or the cousin. There wasn't enough data to establish that. Would this help with that? With this new data set and testing, would it be able to better pinpoint directly who the DNA belongs to versus having a larger profile, familial profile?
Madam Chair, may I address the question from us? The short answer is yes. It absolutely would. The way that this technology is, as it's deployed, is it's extremely complementary to the existing criminal justice technology and those technologies out there. So we do often triage cases based on their previous testing. It gives us a clue whether or not there's DNA available. But this technology, some of the reasons that your case may have stalled out, if you said it potentially was a father or a brother or an individual, maybe because you're limiting to paternal lineage. What this technology actually allows you to do is it has a measurement. It's called a shared centimorgan, but it effectively measures the distance of relatedness. So it doesn't just give you, like a paternal lineage could go back almost infinitely. But based on the amount of shared centimorgans, we're actually able to tell like exactly kind of where it falls in there. There's a lot of publications out there that have been made. And so what we would do is we would try to understand exactly what is that distance or relationship. We'd provide that information to the investigators or those that are involved in those cases. And then they would use that, they would overlay it with everything. But at the end, what we are doing, we're not closing cases. We're not solving cases. We are delivering investigative leads for law enforcement to build those cases around it, but it's extremely complementary. And, while I can't guarantee in those particular cases it would work, what we do is we do work collaboratively with the investigators to help them understand the results they're given, and it's very likely that it could support those types of cases. And please let me know if you need follow-up clarity on that.
May I, Chair, just
Continue.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, if I could just, this is very interesting to me, having worked on cases with DNA, and so I'm wondering if you have anything that can help, we could provide to the committee that could help illustrate kind of the actual difference in what's currently being done with CODIS with what would be done with a larger database, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, and I can respond direct. Okay.
You may respond direct for the entire hearing.
Okay, I'm
Yes,
just trying
please.
to follow protocol here. Thank you very much for that. Yes, I'm certain there's some materials that we can provide you. There are a lot of publications out there, and at this point, again, we're 6+. The technology that I'm also talking about, just to be clear, is not new technology. It's been around since the early 2000s, primarily designed initially for medical field. So the testing itself has been vetted. The application to forensics is what's newer in the past 6 years. So there are a lot of materials out there that can be provided to that, and including peer-reviewed publications that would be able to be shared with you so that you can better vet this technology.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember Cole.
Good morning. Thank you for this. I think this is fantastic and really interesting. So I think I heard you say that each test is roughly $10,000 to $15,000, and so this appropriation is for $500,000. I'm just wondering that basically 33 to 50 cases roughly. Is what
Member
it will do.
Cole, are
Yes.
you asking about
Yes.
finances?
No. How they're going to determine what cases to do.
Do you have the answer for that? Because if not, I have the answer for that. But
Please go ahead.
So would you continue your question on the microphone so they have it?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
my question is just, obviously this appropriation is just for a limited number of cases. So I'm just wondering how we go about figuring out which ones to do. And you said something about triaging, so thank you.
I'll let Madam Chair respond.
Sure. So what we had discussed earlier is obviously, and I'm saying before session when we met, was that, and I'm going to lead you to respond to some ways that has happened in other states. Obviously, here in Nevada, we do need more support when it comes to forensic testing. And like other states, we have 2 very large counties, but we also have smaller, very small rural counties where they don't have the same staffing, the same laboratories, the same abilities. So it's about a balance of how could we make sure that we supported our larger counties, which we may see more frequent or more of a quantity of cases, but also knowing that our smaller communities need it as well. And so that's where some of the policy questions and ideas would come in. So, but I'll let you speak to how this happens in other states, because I know there's a variety. Sometimes it's given to certain departments, sometimes different states, but yes, that, and sometimes what I heard from, I don't know if the correct term is owners or developers.
Either or is fine.
Okay,
Yes. One
was
and the
that
same.
also when it coming to triage, that sometimes it is based on a case-by-case basis, because even if we took a department as large as Metro, even Metro would have to determine and decide which cases would we like to, or do we need to apply this to.
Yeah, and so to complement on that, the triaging that I had alluded to, that involves almost like a risk assessment on every single case, and this is what a majority of my team does on a daily basis. We consult with law enforcement to understand, or the investigative partners to understand what DNA exists, and we're always looking to figure, we understand that every single time we process it, again, we're consuming evidence. And the last thing we want to ever do is consume evidence and not get a workable result. It basically kills the case. So we work very closely with a lot of crime laboratories to understand the data that had been generated prior to it, so we understand what DNA is available from testing. And then we work with the investigators to understand, is this evidence probative? Because there have been cases that have been brought to us where ultimately we run DNA, we make an identification, and it was somebody that wasn't involved. So over the past 6 years, a lot of this has evolved. At this point, we've worked thousands and thousands of these cases. It's been vetted through the system. So there is an upfront triaging of the suitability of the case for testing. And then as far as administering it, that's an interesting question that really needs to be vetted. We've had success in working with agencies in Florida where as a pilot, a lot of this is a pilot. The goal is, can we develop this as a roadmap towards this being fully implemented in Nevada and making it universally accessible. So we've had situations where larger counties may have received a portion of it. In Florida currently, where we're working as a state law enforcement agency, individual agencies can apply for this funding on a case-by-case basis after reviewing it with us. So it's a matter of where this funding ultimately is parked. Ideally, it's in a central location where law enforcement has the ability to reach out and apply and ask, can you guys work my case? And pretty quickly, yes, it's 33 to 50 cases is a good number. The range, and just so you know, that $10,000 to $15,000 is everything from testing to database upload through the investigative process. So it does give a lot of chance for success, but it does kind of need to be parked in an area that allows law enforcement to be able to access these funds. And there are specific examples we can give and share as well. I don't know if that adequately answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here this morning. So I think that this sounds like a very powerful technology, and I appreciate you bringing it to us. My question is, how widespread is this technology? Is it only your company that we would have to direct all this money to? Could the crime labs take some of this money to do things in-house? I'm just wondering how many entities could qualify for this money.
Yeah, and thank you for the question, Assembly Member. It's a very good question as well. I didn't fully introduce myself. I've been in this DNA forensic world for 17 to 18 years. I was at another private laboratory for 14 prior to being with Othram for 3. Since 2018, several other organizations have brought online this technology. It's primarily been driven by the private service providers, mostly due to funds available and bandwidth to bring online new technologies. But what we've seen, so the short answer is yes, there are other providers. This is not a bill that automatically directs funds to Othram. We've been at it and developing this longer than most. That said, we have worked with many crime laboratories, many law enforcement agencies that do have an interest in onboarding it, and it becomes a roadmap of their internal funding, their internal staffing, their internal prioritizations. As a quick example, what we see often are crime laboratories or investigators, the first thing that they'll bring online is that investigative piece. So we run the lab work, they do the investigation. We work, and you asked how widespread this is. I mean, we work with federal agencies, state agencies, statewide agencies, and local agencies throughout the country. So all of them, everybody involved in this space is working to onboard it in some form. Sometimes it is through outsourcing completely. Sometimes it's bringing online a portion of the technology, and sometimes it's bringing online the whole thing. And we are working on roadmaps for those agencies that want to do it. So again, hopefully that adequately answered your question as well. Yep.
And again, just for all members, the last two questions from the last two members were excellent. This is really the heart of why we're here, is to create a policy around this that works for Nevada. So so I appreciate your questions, because you're getting right to why we're here. The next question will be from Assemblymember Ordlicker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this presentation. So this follow up on the same line with Assemblymember LaRue Hatch. As you indicate, there are different companies, and I gather from a little Googling that some are not-for-profit, some are for-profit, and sometimes we get nervous when companies are for-profit, and maybe we should be more inclined to giving priority to a not-for-profit. Could you comment on that? I know some for-profits also overcharge, but for-profits have a profit motive that maybe a not-for-profit doesn't.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I will also say in my previous work, I was at a for-profit company that helped in clearing the rate backlogs throughout the state of Nevada. So what you often see with many of these companies, especially the for-profit ones, is it's not a highly profitable space that we're all in. It's a space that we are all trying to work to advance this technology. And as you work with these organizations, and I can tell you the core that we do at Othram is really trying to advance this technology. So every time we are running casework, we are continuing to invest in ourselves and invest in this technology. As far as prioritization, as what organizations go to, this ultimately becomes the decision of the folks that are involved. But what I will say is the single measure of success for running these cases is to resolve these cases. And ultimately, we talk about the triaging. The single principle that we're working on is to do what's best for this case. So rather than look at the companies and the types of the companies and the structure, what I always encourage folks to do are look at the technology. What technology is going to be best for these cases? Is it the technology that's generating the most data? Is it the technology, a lot of times these non-for-profits that you're seeing through Googling, they don't have laboratories. So they're outsourcing DNA here. The evidence is going somewhere else. They're using a third-party database to do something else. So the considerations that have to be made are what's best as far as the technology for this case, what's best for the impact and the privacy of the data that you're generating, where is the data going, how is it being utilized, and who has the infrastructure of this. And beyond that, many of these not-for-profits, they don't have laboratories, they're not accredited to the same forensic standards that others are doing. So I do think, in all honesty and all respect, it's likely a mistake to look at this technology from that. It's important to look at the individual cases and think about what technology is best for this case. And what that means is what technology is going to minimize any unnecessary consumption of this evidence and ultimately lead towards a resolution. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. We will return back to Assemblymember Roth.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again for the presentation. This is very interesting. That kind of triggered something in my brain. So I'm wondering, in the states that this is currently being implemented, have there been challenges under either Dauber or Fry to the scientific reliability of the science, and how have those held up?
Yeah, and thank you for your question, Assemblymember. Sorry, my brain, where is it going? As far as the way that this technology works in almost all cases so far, is that we are generating, as I mentioned, an investigative lead for law enforcement. It ultimately becomes part of the early stages of their investigations, and as a result, it often gives probable cause for arrests and to move forward on this. What ends up going to court in almost every case that we've worked is once they take that investigative lead, they get their probable cause, they may get a new reference sample from that individual suspect and compare it using the traditional testing. That's the DNA technology that's going to court more often than not, the tried and true. That said, this technology has been tried in court in front of a jury case. We've been in front of a few, including some in Texas as well as Maine. Texas was a Daubert hearing. The case at hand was the first one was the Carla Walker case in 1974, homicide victim, where the admissibility was challenged and it went through just fine. Resources can be provided on those cases as well if needed, but there have been hundreds of cases in addition to those few that have actually been gone through the court where this has been put in front of a jury trial that have been resolved without this being brought up. Again, just part of the investigative search. And I know you're an attorney, so hopefully I adequately answered that question as well. And so thank you.
Probably be interested to know we have someone who's both a doctor and an attorney up here, so
I know, I'm just sitting down here sweating bullets when I get this.
you're doing a fine job. Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember Urick.
Thank you, Chair, and I do think you're doing a fine job. This presentation has harkened me back to the days when I was the commander of the Criminalistics Bureau at the Henderson Police Department, where I had the privilege of overseeing the crime lab and crime scene investigations, and this technology has always fascinated me, and how it continues to evolve is seriously impressive. However, I have been retired for more than 10 years now, and so my question is, can you give us an idea of how the scope of the problem in Nevada today? You know, for example, how many of these cases do we have either in backlog, or how often are they showing up where we have unidentified remains, or in these FGG cases where we're not getting a CODIS match? Can you help us understand the number, the volume of types of cases that we're dealing with?
Yes, thank you for your question, Assembly Member. As far as the scope goes, it is a bit of a difficult thing to measure. So where I would start is the easiest cases, to be honest, to identify that are suitable for testing are unidentified human remains cases. The reason those are very straightforward is you know you have an unsolved case, and all you need to know is, are there remains to be tested? We don't have to look deep into the testing. There is a national database called NamUs that houses unidentified remains cases as well as missing persons cases, and there are over 300 unidentified remains cases in Nevada that are logged within that system. A majority of those coming from Clark County and Washoe County. We do also believe that is just a fraction of the cases that are suitable. The next point, and I actually was looking into this morning to try to anticipate this question, and I went to the Clark County unsolved homicide, Las Vegas unsolved homicide case. And I was trying to see if there was a statistic on there, but instead there were page after page after page of unsolved homicides by decades. There are hundreds and hundreds of unsolved homicides in Las Vegas alone. Not all of those are necessarily suitable for testing, but you know there may not be a DNA evidence available or may be consumed. But we know that we're looking at hundreds of cases, and then beyond that, as I had alluded to, I was personally involved in working with agencies in my previous life before Othram, and helping to clear rape kit backlogs. I know in Vegas alone, we helped test, oh my gosh, I don't remember the number exactly, maybe 8,000 plus unsolved rape kits. And we know that of the DNA that gets searched and run in those, only about half of them get searched in CODIS. So we know there are hundreds of cases that are searching in CODIS from the rape kits alone from there. So I would argue that the number of cases is probably easily in the hundreds, probably into the thousands in Nevada alone. And again, the most obvious cases to start with, and this is where many of the other states have started, are with the unidentified remains cases. And that alone, there are 300 plus in NamUs. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I just want to, before I ask my questions, okay, I think members have if you could just briefly explain overall I guess just overall, if you could, what is your success rate? Like from the cases that you've been given or invited to work on to what actually comes to it. And we can look at success as either a conviction or exoneration, but where the science proved the case. So if you could, do you have a percent or anything for that?
Thank you for your question, Madam Chair. It's actually it's a good question. It's a challenging one. Part of it is because, you know, I would agree that the measure of success and needs to be resolved cases, and in all honesty, that's been put into several bills in other states as well, like how are successful, and that creates a level of accountability and making sure the right technology is applied. So I do think it's an important question. The first thing that we do, as I alluded to, is we triage cases prior to coming. We're trying to ensure that we have good DNA. And then once we get into the laboratory, we have another mechanism of triaging those cases further to ensure the DNA that we've seen on paper matches what we see in the lab. And what we see is approximately 80 to 90% of the cases that we run in our laboratory generate a workable profile. And what happens once we get a workable profile, because we're getting so much data, we are able to provide investigative information to the investigators immediately. It may not necessarily be the solve, the person, all of that, but we have the ability to provide who did they match to in the database? Are there surnames that are common that may have shown up on an investigative worksheet? What is the biogeographical ancestry of these individuals? So we're able to provide investigative information in 80 to 90% of the cases we receive. Now, what's harder to measure is that conviction or the exoneration, mostly because there is a bit of a bell curve on how these cases resolve. Some cases will resolve quickly in the genealogical process. Some cases will take upwards of a year. But what we've seen is upwards of about 75% of these cases that we run do result in an identification in the better part of a year. The single best data point that I have, that I shared, and it's not necessarily an Othram data point, it's one that we worked with NamUs. We do all of the forensic genetic genealogy for the NamUs program, and I watched them present recently at a training to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. We do a lot of work with that group as well. They presented that over the course of the year and a half, 2 years that they had worked with Othram, over 50% of the cases that they had submitted to us for testing had 95% of the cases they had sent to us resulted in a DNA profile. Over 50% of the cases had resulted in a named ID, and another 25 to 30% had investigative leads that they expected to resolve. I don't love putting a percentage on it. What I don't want to do is set expectations, but we do have an extremely high success rate. And again, it all comes down to applying the best technology for these cases. And we've done this in thousands of cases. On Othram's website alone, if you were ever to go there, there's approximately 500 cases that we can talk about of the few thousand that we've worked. And these are just the ones that we can talk about. We don't have permission to talk about cases that are still being adjudicated, for example. So I know that's not a hard and fast answer, but it does work in an extremely high rate when properly applied.
Thank you. And are you able to tell us maybe how many or a percent of your work has been on death penalty cases?
I don't have that answer.
Okay.
Thank you. No.
Thank you. And my last question is, what about privacy concerns?
Yeah, that's a really good question, one that I would expect as well. Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Privacy is always going to be one of the concerns as it relates to DNA technology, as you guys are probably involved in legislation over the years. We are, there's the most important thing that we are careful about is where is the data going, who are we searching against, and how do they know? So, as I mentioned that we're searching different databases, there are 2 databases that we're able to search against that allow law enforcement agencies to search. It's not the big ones that you've heard. It's not the 23andMe's. It's not Ancestry.com. There's a DNA database called Family Tree DNA and GenMatch. And in these databases, the individuals that are having their profiles searched against have opted in to allow law enforcement to search. So they are offering their profiles to help support these investigations. But beyond that, throughout the course of the investigations, we are often asking citizens to provide a DNA sample to help us get closer towards that answer. The way that we operate at Othram, because we do 100% of this work in-house, is we do not take that DNA profile and search it and upload it against other databases. We can isolate that data to support the case at hand, and we can do this, again, because we have all of these tools in-house. We are extremely protective about the DNA that is generated, that the DNA is searched. The DNA that is being searched against these databases does not sit in a public visible portal. So if you're in one of these databases and you get a new match and it's related to somebody that committed a crime, that's not going to happen. It's a one-way search against it. And the data itself is extremely protected through the systems that have been put in place. And again, this is not a new technology. The data has been generated for 20 years, but we're 6 years plus into this, and we do operate on guidelines. And again, not to go back to the conversation about what organization to work with. This is the vetting that law enforcement needs to do, and you guys need to do, is to understand who are the private testing partners that are doing this, and how are they handling the data. So there is an immense protection for the data itself, as the way it's searched, the way it's used publicly, and the way it's exposed to these cases. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. We have one final question from Assemblymember Nadeem.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for your presentation and for explaining it so well. So my question is like, with the simple DNA test, suppose we can solve 5 cases out of 10. With this kind of extensive testing, how many cases can be solved better than the simple DNA testing?
Yeah, and thank you for your question, Assembly Member. Again, the statistic on solvability is a challenging one. So we would look at those 5 cases that are unsolved, and as I alluded to, we'd expect about half of them to 3/4 of them to resolve. The interesting thing is also about those 5 that were solved using the other technology. This technology is much more powerful as it relates to an investigative tool. So we have seen agencies apply these earlier on in the investigations, almost sometimes in parallel with the current testing to help drive answers quicker. While we would we are working to advance technology to improve the solvability rate. How do you run with the data? It's a very difficult question to answer on exactly how many of the 5 of 10, but we do know that about half of the cases, if not more of the cases that we run, will ultimately result in an identification. And again, for those that don't, we are able to provide some level of investigation. And going back to something I said is I truly believe that this technology, the goal is to make it universally acceptable, but it's also extremely complementary to that previous testing. And I do envision future workflows, especially as we get into working more current cases, where it'll almost be done in parallel. And some of those 5 to 10 that may have resolved using traditional testing, I don't know what time period those were resolved. Those may have been resolved in a day, a week, or 3 years. If we run these in parallel, what we're going to try to do is bring answers to families quicker, identify and resolve these cases quicker. And eliminate suspect, exonerate those quicker as well. It's a collaborative technology that's going to the only thing it's going to do is help bring more answers to more families, more justice, more certainty, more fairness, more equity. That's what we're working towards.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you so much for your presentation. At this time, we're going to open it up for testimony. So if you would take a step back into the
Okay.
seats for now.
Thank
Thank you. So anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in support of AB 473? Not seeing anyone. Is there anyone in Las Vegas that would like to testify in support of AB 473? Also not seeing anyone broadcasting. Will you open the lines, please?
If you would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 473, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 473, please press star 9 now. Chair, there are no callers wishing to testify in support at this time.
Okay, thank you so much. Then I'll open it up for opposition testimony, beginning here in Carson City. Not seeing anyone. Is there anyone there in Las Vegas? Broadcasting, will you open the lines?
If you would like to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 473, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers wishing to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Then we'll open it up for neutral testimony, beginning here in Carson City.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Tanya Brown, TONJABROWN, Advocates for the Inmates and the Innocent. The only reason we are going into neutral, because we notice that something in the bill that maybe we want to expand, so that is why, but we strongly support the bill, okay? Under Section 1, subsection 2B, to include a number 3, we'd like to see something like if the genetic results match in CODIS of an unknown perpetrator assigned to a criminal case, matches in CODIS, and the person who's been convicted of this crime and the person who's convicted of the crime must be exonerated, whether the person is incarcerated, not incarcerated, or deceased. It could be possible in the future that the DNA would expand, allowing persons' DNA to go into the CODIS and find unknown perps, thereby exonerating the innocent. We have a letter we'd like to to read. We have written a letter in support of AB 473 to emphasize the critical role of forensic genetic genealogy and exonerating wrongfully convicted injuries even after death. This revolutionary technology has reshaped criminal investigations not only by identifying perpetrators of unsolved crimes, but also by correcting devastating injustices. For decades, wrongful convictions have stained our justice system, often resulting from flawed investigations, unreliable testimony, or outdated forensic methods. Innocent individuals have been sentenced to life behind bars, some even dying before their innocence could be proven, while traditional forensic DNA analysis has led to exoneration for forensic genetic genealogy extends beyond conventional methods, ensuring that justice can prevail after a wrongful conviction. The techniques has proven instrumental in several high-profile cases, such as the Benz brothers case and the Christopher Tapp's exoneration. Robert and David Benz were wrongfully convicted of a crime they did not commit. Years later, the forensic genetic genealogy lab investigators to the true perpetrator by reconstructing family trees and identifying a match in public genetic basis.
Brown.
This revolution.
Ms. Brown.
Yes.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
However, this is not, according to the rules of the committee, a true neutral testimony. So what I know, and it's difficult because usually neutral is more for like agency impact, something like that. And I know you were like, well, we kind of had some pluses and some. So here's what I'll do. I will, because you did not finish reading your letter, I'll allow you to submit the letter under support testimony, and the suggestions and changes that I hope that you will email so that we have it written out. I will allow you, that will have to go into opposition testimony. Because again, if there's any changes, if you don't support the bill in its entirety. Opposition. So your amendments can go into opposition and your letter can go into support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in neutral for Assembly Bill 473? Not seeing anyone. Is there anyone in Las Vegas that would like to testify in neutral? Also not seeing anyone. Broadcasting, will you open the lines, please?
If you would like to testify in neutral for Assembly Bill 473, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 556, please press star 6 to unmute your phone.
For the inmates.
You may
Can
begin.
you hear me?
Yes, we
Anne Marie
can.
Grant, Advocates for the Okay, great. Anne Marie Grant, Advocates for the Inmates and the Innocent. I'd actually like to continue reading Miss Brown's letter, so I guess I'm in the wrong thing as well. It should be support.
Yes,
Could I
excuse me, we're in neutral right now. So if you do you have a neutral testimony?
Then I'm going to just read this in neutral. Yeah.
Okay,
Anne
the
Marie
letter's
Grant,
in
Advocates for the
support.
Inmates
All right,
and the
next
Innocent,
caller, please.
ANNEMA.
Next caller.
Chair, there are no other callers to testify in neutral at this time.
Okay, thank you so much. With that, then I will welcome the presenters back up for any final remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and again, thank you to the Nevada Judiciary Board for the opportunity to speak. Just as a final remark, again, I do want to remind and reiterate that every one of these cases that we're talking about represents, and there's a victim, there's a family, there are populations and individuals that could benefit from this technology, and we've successfully been able to work through developing the impact and driving success, even though funding has been limited and primarily done philanthropically. I want to also remind you that the goal of this technology is to bring answers, to bring justice, to bring certainty, to bring equity, and to bring fairness to so many of these cases. And I appreciate everybody's attention, everybody's questions. I thought they were extremely good. Forward-thinking as far as application of this, clarifying the technology. I appreciate your guys' time, and I appreciate the opportunity to present on this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And with that, I will go ahead and close the hearing on Assembly Bill 473. Next, we have Senate Bill 87, which revises provisions relating to forensic medical examinations. So, Senator, whenever you all are ready, we'll give you a few minutes to get settled, and then you may proceed whenever you're ready. Your hearing is open.
Good morning, Assembly Judiciary Committee. My name is Melanie Scheibel. I'm the State Senator for District 9. Happy to be here today to present SB 87. SB 87 was a request from the Joint Interim Standing Committee on the Judiciary, which I was proud to serve as the Vice Chair of. And now as the Chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I come before you with SB 87, which, to summarize, requires that the state reimburse counties for certain costs for forensic medical examinations for sexual assault victims and survivors, as well as examinations of strangulation. In previous sessions, this body had allocated $10,000 per county from the state general fund to reimburse the cost of those examinations. SB 87 is a continuation of that program with just a slight change in the structure of it. Instead of allocating $10,000 in the bill or in statute to each county, it now allows for a separate appropriation to be made so that depending on how much money is available in any particular biennium, that amount of money can change, but the state will still reimburse the counties for the cost of performing those examinations. SB 87 also clarifies that this can be used towards both sexual assault examinations as well as strangulation examinations. And with that, I would like to turn it over to the expert in this field, Ms. Ortenberger, to give a little bit more context and walk through the bill if we need.
Thank you. Liz Ortenberger for the record, Ortenburger. I am the CEO for SafeNest. And I'm going to apologize up front that the Senator and I have not had time to touch base on the conceptual amendments regarding this bill. We did have a meeting with Department of Child and Family Services on Friday to help align everything so that it is correct. I can share with you that in Clark County, Nevada, right now, where 80% of the domestic violence strangulations and 80% of sexual assaults are taking place, we have one forensic nurse who sadly passed away 2 weeks ago. This has left a gaping hole that was apparent when we had only one, but when we have only none, and only one point of failure in a system that requires exams in order to find justice, but also to find the medical treatment that survivors need, we are in a situation that is unfair to survivors and those that relied on that forensic exam to move their quest for justice forward. In addition, we sit in a landscape where in rural communities, survivors have to drive hours and hours to get an exam. This bottleneck on exams is created by the way that the current legislation is written, probably out of phenomenal intention for a much smaller state and a much smaller county. We look forward to updating this legislation to do several things. One is, as the Senator mentioned, include strangulation exams in the sexual assault Victims of Crime Compensation Fund allowances. So while this is not a state appropriation, it is a Victims of Crime Compensation Fund. So this is a fund that is provided by the federal government to our state, and then as we use it, it is replenishable. It is in the opinion of the Department of Child and Family Services, this fund will not go away, and that it will continue to be replenishable through the systems related to the federal government. I will say that procedures are already in place should that fund run low in an interim session to replenish that fund so that all of these things have been happening for years in Nevada, and we would be able to use that. The other major change is that, as the Senator mentioned, nurses would be able to bill this fund directly. So medical care providers would be able to directly bill the state for the cost of their exams. This is immensely helpful not only for those providing in the urban and rural environments, but also for our tribal lands who right now have no billing mechanism through a county. No survivor should be put in an Uber from a hospital and told to go get a rape kit at another hospital. No survivor should have to sit in a waiting room at a hospital waiting 6 to 18 hours to get an exam. No survivor should have to drive 8 to 12 hours to get an exam. We can do better in this place, and it simply takes changing this or adopting this bill so that nurses and medical providers in this field can bill the state directly. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask a question right now. Are you still in your presentation?
I think we've concluded. We're ready for questions.
Okay, thank you. Just to be clear, and I know I appreciate that you all spoke to me this morning and said, oh, we're still working out amendments. And we all understand that, especially at this point. Sometimes those amendments literally come about 10 minutes before you walk into a hearing, right? So we appreciate that. And of course, that gives us an inability to have them presented to members beforehand. But could you just again go through and clarify what you suspect you will be submitting as proposed or the conceptual amendments?
Absolutely, Chairwoman. Liz Ortenberger. So we have several conceptual amendments. The first is moving everything into NRS 217.300, which is where the current Victims of Crime Compensation revised statute sits. The second is changing medical facility to medical provider to ensure the largest width of providers are able to accomplish these exams with appropriate oversight. The third conceptual amendment is instead of having the caps of 1,000 and 1,500 on the subsequent exams, the reimbursement rate will be set by the Department of Health and Human Services annually. And it otherwise cleans up language to remain consistent throughout the bill. Those are the three large amendments we see.
Okay, thank you. Then you are ready for member questions now. Okay, we will begin with Assemblymember LaRue Hatch.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you for bringing that. I was actually going to ask about the billing the providers directly, so I appreciate you addressing that. If I can, then I'll just pivot to my other question, which is, can you just speak to the impact this will have on our rural constituents and the need that they may have for these changes?
Liz Ortenberger, for the record, absolutely. So currently we have one. So I'll speak about Nye County, which is our closest sister in the space. So in Nye County, right, of course we have Pahrump, but there are many other rural areas within the county. They would have to drive right now to Las Vegas to get an exam, and that's one small. So Tonopah. That's a 4-hour drive. So this would allow there to be. Now, whether or not there is a medical provider that's willing to do these exams in Pahrump that's where our work comes in recruiting those nurses and building up those programs and educating around the change, the legislative change. But that's what it would mean. It should mean that your closest sort of like small rural community could have a provider.
You're welcome. Our next question is from Assemblymember Roth.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation. My question, actually, I had a constituent in Washoe County who was advocating, I think it was last week during the Coalition's Day, Advocacy Day, and one issue that they raised, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that my understanding is that the CAC in Washoe County is the only facility that provides SART exams, and they have had issues where an individual will go to the hospital because that's often the first point of contact if you have been a victim of sexual assault to seek a SART exam. And the hospitals don't do them, and there's oftentimes a disconnect or a miscommunication about where they can go next. And they raised this issue to me, and I'm wondering if with a conceptual amendment, if there is a way we could help address that in this bill. I don't want to hijack anything, obviously, but this was just, there seems to be a notice issue, and because we are dealing here with especially direct payments, if you can kind of speak to if you've had those conversations or considered that in any way.
Liz Ortenberger, yes. So I can explain to you Clark, because I'm certainly not a Washoe expert. So in Clark County, what we have had, we have documented cases of are survivors that'll go to sort of, say, Dignity Health's emergency room and then be Ubered to UMC, which is our county hospital, for an exam. So I can imagine similar things are happening in Clark County. I also have documented cases of survivors going to an emergency room, getting the full suite of exams, and them not being admissible by the district attorney's office because it's not the forensic nurse. So we have some, I think, issues probably across the state. Those are the kinds of issues I'm most familiar with. We've been working with the forensic, and I'm probably not going to get their name right, but it's essentially the group of forensic nurses out of UNLV that's got a statewide group that gets together with all the licensed forensic nurses. It would be not the goal of this bill, but certainly my goal as a provider in the space, that list was readily and easily available either through our hotlines in various parts of the state, and or, of course, law enforcement is the number one provider of getting folks to these exams, so law enforcement would also be updated and educated. But I think that falls more on the plates of those of us that are on the front lines of this work to make sure that it's actually getting to the survivors who need it.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember Nadeem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Maybe this is not the part of the bill, but what surprises me is that why there's only one nurse.
Liz Ortenberger, for the record, also surprising to me. I think what we've done, a lot of what we do in Nevada is phenomenal work, and we grow, but not all of our systems get the same sort of understanding of the legislative barriers put in with all great intention when they were first written, but then maybe haven't grown with the size of the county. So it's not that there's a mandate to only have one nurse, it's that the way the billing system is set up sort of limits a county's ability to create a robust system of forensic nurses. And a $10,000 cap is what's on the current bill, which quite frankly is very limited when you look at the size of a county like Clark or Washoe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing any other questions, so we will go ahead and open it up for testimony. Beginning here in Carson City, if there's anyone that would like to testify in support of Senate Bill 87. Not seeing anyone. Is there anyone in Las Vegas? Also not seeing anyone. Broadcasting, will you please open the lines?
If you would like to testify in support of Senate Bill 87, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers wishing to testify in support at this time.
Okay, thank you. Then I will open it up for opposition testimony, beginning here in Carson City. Mr. Rogan, this is part of your 2 minutes.
Good morning, Chair Miller, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Cadence Matievich, CADENCE, representing Washoe County. And Madam Chair, here in opposition, under what I think are the proper rules of the committee, that we're in opposition to the reprint, but as we understood the conceptual amendment that was outlined for you this morning, we would be in support of that. So trying to testify properly, but just as the reprint is written, we do have some concerns. We appreciate the senator and the proponents for hearing the concerns of the county, and for all of the work that's been done to try to manage this very important service, and balancing that with the resources of the county. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And you are appropriate. And I also understand too that often before we can make final positions, we need to see amendments printed. We need to see things printed. So that is very fair. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Chair Miller and members of the committee. Jeff Rogan on behalf of Clark County. That's JEFFROGAN. And I just echo the comments of Ms. Matievich from Washoe County. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in Carson? Then we will move to Las Vegas for opposition testimony. Please proceed.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Rochelle Eckroos, RACHELLEKROOS. I am a forensic nurse practitioner, a clinical forensic expert, and the executive director of a nonprofit medical forensic services team in Clark County with 2 nurse practitioners and several forensic nurses providing medical forensic services to thousands of patients in Clark County and Southern Nevada, including Nye County. I appreciate the Senator's commitment to expanding access to these services. However, I must oppose the proposed SB 87 amendments, which risk unintended harm to the very populations they aim to serve. I specifically oppose the payment caps, the definition of medical facility, and the characterization of forensic medical exams. First, capping similar forensic medical services at different rates is unclear and misleading. A forensic medical exam, whether for sexual assault, strangulation, or a combination of the two, requires specialized clinical education, skills, and expertise. The forensic medical interventions are similar, regardless of the type of violence experienced, and guided by the patient's history, clinical observations, and patient consent. I strongly recommend equal compensation or cap rates for both types of exams. Secondly, forensic medical exams take place in various settings, including clinics, hospitals, operating rooms, care facilities, and detention centers, all of which my nurses have provided services in Clark County and Nye County. Regardless of location, the specialized clinical program delivering the forensic medical services should be authorized to bill for their services. Defining medical facility by the exam location ignores established care models and risks disrupting access to timely, trauma-informed services. I urge amending the definition to ensure that compensation goes to the provider of forensic medical exams, not the exam site. Lastly, the purpose of the forensic medical exam is the same, regardless of whether it is related sexual violence, strangulation, or an experience that involved both types of violence. It is not either or. It is not medical or forensic. It's both. It's assessing the clinical needs.
Excuse me, your 2 minutes are up, so can you wrap it up in one statement?
I can wrap 2 statements real quick.
Very quick.
So presenting it otherwise disregards the required scope of practice and standard of care for forensic clinicians. And I'm confident that we all have a shared goal of creating equity and not proposing amendments that end up with inequities.
Okay, thank you.
So by refining this, we can further prevent harm. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else there in Las Vegas? Not seeing anyone. Will you please open the lines?
If you would like to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 87, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers wishing to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Then I'll open it up for neutral testimony beginning here in Carson City.
Good morning, Chair Serena Evans for the record, Policy Director for the Nevada Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. We look forward to, SERENAEVANS. We appreciate the presentation. We look forward to seeing that amendment. We feel confident that with that amendment we'll be able to get to support, but without seeing it we can't be there quite just yet. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone in neutral there in Las Vegas? Not seeing anyone, please open the lines.
If you would like to testify in neutral for Senate Bill 87, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers wishing to testify neutral at this time.
Thank you so much. Then I will welcome the bill presenters back up for any final words.
Liz Ortenberger for the record. I just wanted to apologize that you don't have the conceptual amendment in front of you, and I wanted to address the negative comments by Nurse Eckros. The payment caps have been taken out in the conceptual amendment, allowing the state to set the reimbursement levels annually, and the term medical facility has been changed to medical provider in the amendment to solve that issue as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with that, I will go ahead and close the hearing on Senate Bill 87. Next, we have public comment. Just a reminder that public comment is not to make any comments on any bills that we've heard today, but anything else that is under the purview of this committee. So with that, we'll open it up to public comment here in Carson City. Not seeing anyone. Is there anyone in Las Vegas that would like to make public comment? Also not seeing anyone. Broadcasting, please open the lines.
If you would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 556, please press star 6 to unmute your phone. You may begin.
Anne Marie Grant, ANNEMARIEGRANT. My brother Thomas Purdy was killed and murdered by Reno police during a mental health crisis when he was hog-tied and asphyxiated to death. Not a single officer has been held accountable. No indictment, no discipline, no investigation by the DA's office, no justice. This is what zero accountability looks like in Nevada. If the people sworn to protect us can kill without consequence, especially someone in crisis, then the system is broken. Nevada urgently needs laws that hold officers criminally accountable when they use excessive force. Until police know they can go to prison for abusing their power, these murders will continue to keep happening. My brother deserved help, not a death sentence. When elected officials selectively enforce public comment rules, allowing some individuals more time or leeway while strictly limiting others, it undermines the integrity of the democratic process. These forums are meant to be equitable spaces where every member of the public has an equal opportunity to speak. Favoritism erodes public trust and sends a message that some voices matter more than others. Fair, consistent application of the rules is essential to preserving transparency, accountability, and respect for all constituents. When elected officials bend public rules for their allies but cut others off, they're not just being unfair, they're showing clear bias and disrespect for the public they claim to represent. Playing favorites in a public forum sends a message that some voices are more valuable than others based on politics or personal connections. That kind of selective enforcement doesn't just erode trust, it exposes a broken system where accountability only applies to some. The rules should apply equally or they mean nothing at all. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Next caller.
Chair, there are no other callers to provide public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you so much. Then I will go ahead and close public comment. And with that, that's the end of our agenda for the day. So I will adjourn this meeting and I will see you all back tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. You're welcome. Thank you.